Good day. As I have had occasion to say on several occasions in recent videos, August and September are the traditional times for military exercises, and important ones have been happening around the world. There is, for example, a military exercise currently underway in Russia between the Russian and Indian armies. This is a relatively small exercise involving only a few hundred troops, but nonetheless it is symbolic of the good relations which continue to exist between India and Russia, and which, by the way, extend all the way back to India's independence in 1948. But the two big exercises which are taking place, and the ones that are of geopolitical significance, and which I have also discussed in recent programs, are those involving the United States and its allies, which are naval exercises currently taking place in the Pacific, and the identically timed exercises, ground and air exercises, which are taking place in North China, involving China and Russia. And those exercises involve thousands of troops. They are major exercises, and the defense ministers of both countries, China and Russia, will be in attendance. And we recently got further confirmation from the Chinese about these exercises. They discuss in further detail the kind of units and forces which will be participating in those exercises, and this is what we have read in Global Times. We find in Global Times comments as follows. J-20 fighter jets highlight China-Russia joint strategic drills opening. China and Russia launched a large-scale strategic military exercise in northwest China on Monday, the first joint drill with another country hosted by China since the pandemic outbreak, with the Chinese People's Liberation Army dispatching advanced weapons and equipment, including J-20 stealth fighter jets and Y-20 large transport planes, which were the highlight of the opening ceremony. This is the first time the People's Liberation Army has sent the J-20 in joint drills with another country, and this, along with other exercise arrangements like sharing PLA main battle equipment with the Russian troops, displayed a high level of cooperation and mutual trust between the Chinese and Russian militaries at a time when the two countries are facing challenges from the changing security situation in Central Asia following the US troops' withdrawal from Afghanistan and direct threats from the US and its allies. And then we learn that the exercises will involve a total of 6 warplane echelons featuring J-20 stealth fighter jets, J-11 heavy fighter jets, J-16 multi-role fighter jets, JH-7A fighter bombers, H-6K bombers, and Y-20 large transport planes of the People's Liberation Air Force. And can I say that it is the J-20 that is, of course, the aircraft that here provokes attention, because it is the absolute top-of-the-line fighter that is now entering service in significant numbers with the Chinese Air Force. The other 2 fighter jets that are mentioned, the J-11 and the J-16, are both Chinese developments of Russia's Sukhoi 27 fighter jet, which was supplied to China in the 1990s, reverse engineered by China, and then updated to create first the J-11 and then the J-16. So this is a fourth generation fighter jet, the J-11 and J-16. It's been superseded by the entirely Chinese designed J-20 stealth fighter jets, and those fighter jets are participating in this exercise in circumstances where the Chinese are sharing military technology with the Russians are allowing the Russians to inspect their advanced vehicles and military equipment. And in addition, as a consequence of this, the Russians will also gain a great deal of knowledge and familiarity about the J-20 fighter jet. Now, that is important and interesting, and it is important and interesting in itself because, as I said, it shows that the emphasis and importance that the Chinese are attaching to these particular exercises. But it is also important because, as that Global Times report says, it highlights the extraordinary level of trust that now exists between the Chinese and the Russians. Now, I say that because though the J-20 fighter jet has been displayed by the Chinese and is a well-known fighter jet in that respect, the Chinese have been extremely cagey about its capabilities. They've not shared in details of its capabilities with the international media, and even the United States, with all its enormous intelligence gathering operations, apparently knows very little about it. The Russians, as a result of its participation in this exercise, are going to know a great deal more. One thing they're going to find out is how stealthy the J-20 actually is, because it is to be assumed that the Russians will be bringing their own radar equipment, their own advanced radar equipment, to participate in these exercises, and they will be able to test the J-20 against it. They will also probably be provided with information about some of the J-20's subsystems, its radar, its ASAR radar, its various electronic warfare devices, its other search and track devices, and such things. And no doubt it will also be carrying some of its air-to-air missiles. The Chinese have been working very hard to develop a whole generation, a whole new range of advanced air-to-air missiles, and the Russians will certainly want to know about the capabilities of those. So the Chinese, being prepared to deploy this fighter jet with the Russians over the course of this exercise, are sharing an enormous amount of information with the Russians about one of their most sensitive and important and secret pieces of equipment. And that highlights the extent of the cooperation between the two countries. And I'm going to make a further prediction, which is, of course, that this is not a one-way street. The Chinese are going to be providing information to the Russians about their advanced technologies, and we can be certain that the Russians will, in return, be doing the same. The Russians are now fielding their first fifth-generation fighter jet, the Sukhoi 57, which is differently configured to the J-20. It appears to be intended to be a higher performance fighter jet than the J-20 is, more maneuverable, perhaps faster, perhaps with better acceleration, perhaps not quite as long-ranged, though there are many people I know who debate this, and perhaps also somewhat less stealthy, though the Russians, by the way, categorically deny that. And no doubt the Chinese will be interested in the capabilities of this fifth-generation fighter, the Sukhoi 57 fighter also, and they will be wanting to gain information about that too. And the Russians also are known to be in the process of developing also a range of very efficient and a new range generation of air-to-air missile systems, and the Chinese will want to know about those also, and they will no doubt also want to know about the subcomponents of the Sukhoi 57 and of other analogous aircraft in the Russian military system. But I suspect that the system that will interest the Chinese the most, and which I am fairly sure they will be seeking to buy before very long or obtain a technology transfer agreement about is the S-500 air defense system, which I discussed recently in a recent video which I did. And of course, the S-500 system is important because the Russians claim that it is capable of providing defense against hypersonic missiles, and of course with the American threats to deploy hypersonic missiles on various islands in the Pacific in order to deploy them against Chinese warships and potentially even against the Chinese mainland. The Chinese interest in a system like the S-500, which can perhaps provide a defense against these American hypersonic systems, well, that is obvious. Now, I'm going to just say a few things now about fifth generation fighter jets. And I do this partly because of an event which has just taken place in the United States, which is the death there of Pierre Sprey, the father, as he's often described, of the F-16 fighter jet of the 1970s and of the A-10 ground attack aircraft, also of the 1970s. Both of these aircraft still being in current use by the US Air Force, and in the case of the F-16, also widely exported by the United States around the world. Now, Sprey was a remarkable man. It's important to stress that though he was a trained aeronautical engineer, he was not himself a designer of aircraft. He didn't actually design, as I understand it, the F-16 or the A-10, but he was a conceptual theorist and one who had enormous influence. And in the 1970s, he strongly argued against over-sophisticated fighter jets like the F-15, which was being developed at that time. He said that the United States Air Force needed to prioritize air support for ground troops and not focus exclusively on the glamorous work of air-to-air combat and indeed of strategic bombing. And he also pushed very hard the concept of what he called a light fighter, the idea being a simple, straightforward fighter with a ranging radar and simple missiles that would be a far more effective fighter, according to Sprey, in most combat situations than the very technologically advanced fighters which the United States was developing at that time and which eventually evolved into the F-15. Now, it's fair to say that Sprey was always a controversial figure. There are many people who still strongly disagree with his ideas and who still feel that the F-15 was the superior fighter that was developed in the 1970s. And by the way, I should say that to my knowledge, there are also people in Russia who share those criticisms of Sprey and also think that his over-focus on light fighters was actually based upon outdated ideas dating back to the fighting in Vietnam in the 1960s, and that it has little bearing on fighter jets today. Regardless, the fact remains that Sprey's influence in the 1970s and 1980s was very strong, but it has steadily diminished since then, and the proof of that is the United States' development and deployment of the F-35 stealth fighter, an aircraft that Sprey absolutely hated. And there are lots of things wrong with the F-35 program. Its cost has spiraled out of control, but if we set aside the program and concentrate on the actual aircraft itself, it's probably fair to say that Sprey was its most trenchant critic, and many of the criticisms that you read all over the internet about the F-35 appear to originate with him. It is almost the diametric opposite of the kind of simple, straightforward, highly maneuverable, very fast light fighter that he advocated. It is complex, it is technologically advanced, it is relatively slow, it mainly operates in subsonic speeds, and it is, of course, stealthy, a concept which Sprey apparently didn't take very seriously. But it's fair to point out that if the F-35 has basically swept the board in the United States and is now the United States' premier fighter jet, the other side, the Russians and the Chinese, seem to have gone down very much the same direction. There's the one that Sprey abhorred. Instead of deploying light fighters, they too have gone for complex, advanced, stealthy fighter jets like the J-20 that has been developed by China and the Sukhoi 57 which has been developed by Russia. And perhaps at this point it's worth saying or discussing briefly what fifth generation aircraft or fighter jets are all about. And the aircraft that perhaps set the standard against which all other fighter jets of the fifth generation are measured is the F-22 Raptor, the aircraft that the United States developed in the 1990s and which was for a long time the world's only fifth generation fighter, and which, remarkably, even the United States only deployed in limited numbers, and which the United States says it is now going to phase out from about 2030. And the features of fifth generation fighters, as pioneered with the F-22, is that they are stealthy. That is to say, they have low visibility, in fact, extremely low visibility to radar. They are fast. They can fly without afterburners at supersonic speeds for long distances. They have extremely advanced electronically scanned radars, and they are also extremely, in the case of the F-22, highly maneuverable. Now, even the United States found this a demanding specification to live up to, and the result was that the F-22 became a very complex and expensive aircraft, and eventually it was going to be replaced by the F-35, which was supposed to be a simpler, less expensive aircraft, and which compromised on some of the fifth generation features of the F-22. It is said to be less stealthy. It doesn't have the kind of performance, the speed, and the maneuverability that the F-22 has. And of course, it doesn't have the payload that the F-22 also did, though it's fair to say that the payload of the F-22 was apparently always somewhat disappointing. Well, the interesting thing is that the Chinese and the Russians have chosen to follow the lead of the F-22 instead of the F-35. Both the J-20 and the Sukhoi 57 seem to be closer in concept to the F-22 concept than they are to the F-35 concept. Both are fast, both are complex, both have can fly at speeds at more than supersonic speeds without use of afterburners. Both carry large payloads, in both cases apparently bigger payloads than the F-22, and both are maneuverable, apparently in the case of the Sukhoi 57, extremely so. So the Russians and the Chinese decided to take the lead from the F-22, and perhaps they didn't focus quite so much on light fighters copying the F-35. Both the Chinese and the Russians have displayed light fighters. The Chinese have displayed the F-31 light fighter, which apparently will be aircraft carrier based primarily. In other words, it seems unlikely that it will be used in large numbers by the ground-based Chinese Air Force. And the Russians, of course, a few weeks ago also displayed the Sukhoi 75 Checkmate fighter jet at their MAX air show. I did a program about this. But it seems that that particular aircraft, which is based upon the Sukhoi 57, is primarily intended for export. We've heard reports now that the Russian Air Force is apparently more interested in a new light fighter that the MiG Bureau, the rival to Sukhoi, is apparently developing, which will be like the F-35, used both as a conventional fighter jet and also as a vertical lift jump jet, and which will also, like the F-31, the Chinese F-31, be primarily operated from carriers, with the Russians having programs to build carriers in the 2030s. Well, we will see whether this MiG fighter or fighters ever actually appear. But it does seem, in any event, that the Chinese and the Russians are less keen on light fighters than the United States is, and perhaps that may be because they've looked at the complexity of the F-35 as it has evolved and developed over the years, and they've looked at the cost of that program, and they've also realized that it had to make major compromises in terms of its performance and capabilities, and they feel that this is not a good bargain, not a good deal, and so they've focused instead on the larger fighters, the Sukhoi 57 and the J-20, which are more comparable to the F-22 than they are to the F-35. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about fifth generation fighters. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a technologically minded person, but that's how it looks to me, and that's how it's been reported in the international news media, and especially, dare I say it, the Russian one, where they discuss fighters and fighter jets extensively. There is a vast literature on this in Russia, which one can follow. Regardless, the most important thing to take away from these recent Chinese developments is that the Chinese are now sharing their most advanced technology with the Russians, and the Russians are almost certainly going to be doing the same. They're going to share their most advanced technology with the Chinese. This is a major development. Back in the 1990s and early 2000s, the Russians became very angry when the Chinese reverse engineered aircraft and weapon systems that they exported to China, and the Chinese had to give all kinds of promises never to do that again, which the Russians, by the way, didn't entirely believe. But clearly we're now going beyond that point now. We've reached the point where both the Chinese and the Russians, instead of stealing each other's technologies or buying each other's technologies, are actually going to share their technologies with each other. And I should say that this is an important development in itself, not just because it shows the enormous trust that now exists between these two great military powers, further proof that they are in effect allies in all but name, military allies in all but name, but also because it seems to me that it is only a question of time before they start sharing not just technologies, but research capabilities and production capabilities. And I understand that Scott Ritter, former US Marine Corps officer, intelligence analyst, weapons inspector, and brilliant military commentator, in a broadcast, which I haven't seen, has said that the most potentially game-changing thing of all is when the Russians share their very advanced technologies especially in hypersonics, with the vast Chinese industrial base, so that these systems, these hypersonic systems, can be produced in quantities which no other power or group of powers can ever match. And that will be the great strategic game changer, which will mean that, in effect, in terms of the military balance will have changed or shifted so decisively that any calculations or assessments based on the present balance will become instantly obsolete. Well, we're not quite there yet, but it looks like we're getting closer. I have spoken many times in various programs about what the United States should do in order to prevent that development. I've talked about negotiating with the Chinese and the Russians about arms limitations. We will see whether that happens. But these exercises that are taking place in northern China should fill the United States, the Pentagon, the intelligence community there with concern, and they need to take stock of what is happening. Thank you very much for joining me for this program today. I look forward to you joining me in future programs on this channel and on our main channel, the Duran, where I do programs with my colleague and friend, Alex Christoforou. Please also remember to check out Alex's channel. You will find links under this video. Please also check us out on our other platforms, BitChute, Rumble, ODYSEE, the new free speech platform, SuperU, and Locals, where we have a thriving community and lots of things coming. I'm planning to do live streams there before very long, and we will probably, Alex and I, we will each be doing live streams on Locals before very long. So lots of dramatic and exciting things happening soon on Locals too. So please sign up to Locals and check us out on our other platforms. Please support us to the extent that you can via PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. Please also go to our shop, buy the amazing things that we have there, our shirts, our hats, our hoodies, our sweatshirts, our t-shirts, and all the rest. There are, by the way, some absolutely amazing hats coming. Alex has been refreshing the shop with new products. I've actually asked for some of these hats to be sent to me. They look absolutely stunning, and they are of the same extraordinary, exceptional quality as all of the other products that we sell in our shop. And last but not least, please remember to press the like button if you've liked this video, and check your subscription to this channel. Thank you for joining me today in this video, which where we discuss the changing tectonic, the movement of the tectonic shifts in terms of the overall military balance of power. And if you've liked this video, as I said, please remember to press the like button. Please also check your subscription to this channel. Thank you for joining me again, and I look forward to you joining me again, both on this channel and on our other channels, and have a wonderful day until then.